Hi everyone, this is Origin Stories with Rachel Stevenson. Excited to be with you today to talk about my dad. You've heard about him in a few episodes, and I think it's time to dig in a little bit about my relationship with him and all of the really interesting things that relationship makes me think about at this point in my life. First, I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is crazy. When I started this thing weeks ago, I really joked to the camera and to my daughters who have participated that no one potentially was going to engage. But the truth is, I've heard from people in my life, and I've heard even from strangers out in the world a little bit who have liked things or commented on things. I mean, there's something here that seems to be resonating. And so I just want to thank all of you, people who have reached out to me personally and people who are engaging for being a part of this. And it means a lot. It means a lot. So, the last episode I did was with Simone and Roxy, and we talked about the love story that is my parents. And one of the things that came up is the fact that parts of that story are romanticized because my parents are characters in that story for me. I'm so removed from it that it's taken on, this sort of iconic meaning. Even though my dad survived the car accident that killed my mom, in some ways, he remains a character in that love story as well, because that night changed the trajectory of his life. It changed the trajectory of our relationship. And I feel like even though I had my dad for 36 years, 37 years, I didn't have him completely. And the kind of communication that I'm talking about in Origin Stories, the kind of emotional literacy that I'm saying matters to relationships and partnerships and the way we work and all the rest, was missing from my relationship with my dad. I mean, we communicated at a certain dimension, and we definitely did not communicate in other dimensions that I think are probably the more important ones. And, despite the fact that he was in my life and I had him, even though, not long enough, he died when he was 55, way too young, right? There was something missing for us as father and daughter, especially given the things that I care about and the things that I try to achieve with my own kids. Before I say some more things about that, I wanted to say, back to the point about my dad being a kind of character, he was in the dimension where we communicated and interacted, a really charming, charismatic man. He was handsome. He was funny. He was a great storyteller. He had a kind of energy where, people wanted to be around him and people gravitated towards him. I mentioned that there were plenty of women in his life over the years. He attracted humans. He was a person who could connect in that way. But I feel like there were parts of him that he locked up. I certainly couldn't access them, and I think there were people in his life who couldn't access them either. But, what I saw and experienced in terms of his humor and his ability to connect and tell stories was something that I gravitated towards too as his kid, right? He played a kind of big brother role because he wasn't always around. I lived with his mom. But when he did show up, it was fun and games, and he would chase me around and tickle me and, make jokes. And, there was something about that vibe that obviously I enjoyed. But as I got older, I definitely realized that there were parts of my dad that I really wanted to get to that I couldn't. There were hints of this even when I was a young kid, even before I didn't know what actually happened to my mom on the night of her death, I remember spending a little time with my dad and a new girlfriend. I can't even remember her name at this point. But my dad left the two of us in his car while he ran up to his apartment to get something. And, you know, she was doing her thing, trying to connect with, the kid of her new guy. And, maybe she sensed that there was a disconnect between us, or that there was information that I should have. I don't know what motivated this, but I will never forget that she said to me, "Your dad and I were talking last night about your mom." And he cried. He cried really, really hard. And literally within a couple seconds, my dad came back to the car, so the conversation stopped. And I'm thinking about that now. I mean, I've thought about it since, and it was really interesting to me because I do think she was trying to let me know that there was some part of him that was still connected to my mother, still loved her deeply. I knew this. It was good to hear that. I think the more interesting thing in that moment for me was the fact that my dad was having this kind of emotional experience, was grieving, was sharing that with someone, but he wasn't sharing it with me. And I longed for that. This was long before I realized there was information that I still needed to learn, but I did know deeply that he wasn't coming to me. He wasn't able to share those emotional moments with me, and that was a gap, right? That was something that was missing. Years later, there was another moment that I had that gave me great insight into the depth of my dad's emotions around my mom's death, a depth that I was never able to wade into in everyday life with him. My mother's father died, my granddaddy died, and I was at the funeral along with my father, along with my paternal grandmother. We were all a part of that day, and one of my mother's sisters asked me to read a poem for her as part of the service. She just felt like she couldn't do it. I was happy to read the poem for her, and I cooked up this scheme while I was waiting to go to the podium and the microphone. I realized I was going to have a captive audience, right? This church full of humans there to mourn my grandfather. Maybe this was a chance that I could take to actually honor my mother and acknowledge my mother. And so after I read the poem, I just blurted out, I actually want to take a moment to acknowledge the one daughter who is missing today. That's my mom. She's not here, and I'm sure she loved her father. I remember just as I was saying those words, the sound of kind of a gulping sob. I mean, it was really abrupt, really animalistic in some ways. It was the kind of thing you could tell that just erupted from someone's body. And it turns out that was my father. My father in the middle of this quiet congregation, responding to me, acknowledging my mother, the fact that she was missing, wanting to give her voice. It just came out of him. The crazy thing is, I knew it was him. After the service ended, I searched for him in the crowd. I mean, there were a lot of people in the church, in the parking lot. And I really just wanted to have a moment with him. I wanted to look at him. I wanted to say to him that I'd heard that. And I wanted to acknowledge that we shared sadness around my mom's death. I mean, something we never did together. And I'll never forget when I finally saw him in the parking lot and approached him, my grandmother, his mother, sort of stepped forward. And it felt to me kind of like a protective gesture. She had seen what had happened. I think it upset her. And I think she wanted, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into this, but to me it was a kind of signal that that moment was over. And my dad never acknowledged it. And I went to him again, I looked at him, and I think it was just a, yeah, so what are we doing now kind of moment where we weren't gonna connect about that. And it just felt like such a missed opportunity. But that was the story of our relationship. So I knew, there were these moments that revealed the depth of what he felt, but he just could not make the connection with me. He couldn't do it with me. And I don't know why. Is it because I was too close to my mom? Is it because I reminded him of her? I mean, he told me once when he looked at me that he saw her face when he looked into my eyes. I have the exact same green eyes that my mom had. I mean, it's actually something that's really special. I mean, none of her siblings have the green hazel eye color that she had. I have that color. And so, these are my mom's eyes. And every time he looked into my eyes, he would see the eyes of the woman he loved. And so, I just don't know if there was that and it just made it too hard for him. But the bottom line is that kind of communication, that kind of connection was never happening for us. And I just desperately wanted it, desperately needed it. I longed for it. Now, as I got older, had my first daughter, had my second daughter, at this point in my dad's life, the kind of numbing that he did over the years intensified. I mean, he, like a lot of people in New Orleans, Louisiana, drank and, every day. And he was highly functional. He had a job. He had relationships. He also had a beer in his hand most of the time I saw him. As he got older and as his circumstances changed, like a lot of people in 2008 during the financial crisis, he lost his job and he wasn't able to bounce back quickly, which led to more alcohol use. He started to dabble in opioids and other pills, things like that. I think it was recreational at first and then turned into a bad habit. He wasn't able to look for work actively because I think he was in the throes of this intensifying addiction. And his hours got crazy because he wasn't sleeping. He ended up spending a lot of time in the middle of the night in online communities that were about things that became obsessions for him. He ended up running around New Orleans with a camera, filming things that he truly believed were signs of alien life, right? Like UFOs, and even at one point, alien life forms. And so, this is where things take an intense turn for me, because think of it, the daughter who always longed to connect with my dad, wanted to talk about real life, wanted to be able to acknowledge the grief that we shared. Suddenly, there was a new line of communication opening around us, and it was very serious from his perspective. He was warning me of the end of the world, which he believed was going to happen in 2012. Either it was going to be the end of the world or some sort of moment of enlightenment for people who knew the deal, like him. He got very serious about this and started sending me videos, warning me that we needed to take precautions. I mean, this was really scary. I was the mother of 2 young children, and all I wanted to do was think about the future, right? And I wanted to believe that my kids were going to have a full, happy life ahead of them. And so this narrative that he was really committed to was not welcome. I did not like it. It made me scared. And honestly, even though my dad had always been more of a big brother to me, not so much, a paternal figure, he was my father. And I wanted my father to make me feel safe. And my father was not making me feel safe. He was doing the opposite. He was telling a story of a world that was frightening and a little menacing and a threat to me and my family. So That became a complicated thing. In the end, when I think about his devotion to that narrative, right? Like just these late nights that he was spending gathering evidence to support what he believed to be happening, the community he became a part of. He was actually, in a film that was made by members of this community in the country. Folks flew down to New Orleans to see his footage and interview him. I mean, it was a real thing for him. I really do believe, as I reflect on some of what he shared, that he was trying to find meaning in the world. And the end of the world, and whatever was going to bring the end of the world, was giving him meaning. It was giving him purpose. It was somehow feeding this hunger he had for things to make sense. And 2012 came and went, and the world did not end. And he died in 2013. I don't think that's any coincidence. I think in some ways he was really devastated that we all kept living and breathing and moving and being, and there wasn't something that happened to rock the world. It made him feel even more lost, and the meaning that he had sought, the meaning that he created, was suddenly meaningless. That's ultimately when I think he gave up, essentially, and drank himself to death. I mean, again, that addiction had been getting worse over the years, but ultimately when he was discovered in his apartment, he was surrounded by empty vodka bottles. I mean, I think he made a choice. I think he made a decision that there is no meaning in the world. This thing that I was convinced was going to happen didn't happen. This is the thing that gave me some purpose, and it's gone. I guess the major tragedy for me is that the meaning he was seeking, he wasn't able to find in our relationship, in a relationship with his grandkids, in the family that we could have built together. That is something that I found at the time hurtful, right? And I felt like, aren't we enough in the end? Can the promise of this family ultimately save you? And it couldn't. I mean, I realize now, especially after sharing the description of the moments of my mom's death during the last episode in Love Story, right? The details that were provided by my dad's friend who was in the backseat of the car. I realized that, the night of my mom's death really marked the end of my dad's life in a lot of ways. Even though he lived on for some years, there was a kind of purpose in his life. There was a meaning that he found in my mother and that relationship and the family that we created that was suddenly gone. And he couldn't recover that, right? He couldn't recover that. And even as I got older and tried to put the pieces together in some way and felt like what I could potentially offer him, what my children could potentially offer him, would be redemptive, it was too late.